This is a video response to Haytham Al-Haddad's video entitled ISIS Burns a Live Jordanian Pilot, and I'd like to address some of the points that Haddad makes in this particular video. Before I go into and discuss these arguments, I'd just like to say this, that if this video is an attempt to rebut these allegations that Haddad is a extremist preacher, then this video will not suffice, because just because you attack ISIS, it does not mean therefore that your views or that you're not an extremist. All it means is that there's someone out there that has more extreme views than yourself. So now let's look at some of the arguments that Haddad mentioned in this particular video. So he begins by firstly attacking or criticizing ISIS by their attitude that they have a monopoly of understanding, that they have an exclusive understanding to the hold of the Islamic faith, and that everyone else is incorrect and they're the only ones that are right. So in effect, he's attacking this kind of mindset that they have. And this I found quite ironic, considering that Haddad is a Saudi Wahhabi trained cleric, and Wahhabism, a very controversial movement that was established in the 18th century, and also is also considered, their inception is considered a dark part of the Islamic history. Was a very aggressive and violent movement that pitted itself against the majority of Muslims, regarding the majority of Muslims as being deviant, that were in actual fact misguided. They attacked Sunnis, they attacked Shia, everybody that disagreed with them, and often they carried out massacres and atrocities against other Muslims that simply disagreed with them. And this was done under the pretext of takfir, which is something that is fundamental to the Wahhabi ideology. And takfir is basically a condemnation of other Muslims that disagree with your interpretation of the Islamic faith. Now, another problematic doctrine that the Wahhabi ideology is based upon is the concept of political enforcement of religious faith. They believe that the Wahhabi ideology, or Wahhabis believe that they can enforce their understanding of their understanding of the Islamic faith upon differing Muslims, with Muslims that have a different conception or different understanding of the Islamic faith. And what this does, this completely eradicates any kind of difference of opinion, any kind of diversity within the Islamic tradition. Now, also, I think that Haddad attacking ISIS, whilst being pro-Saudi, is also upholding a double standard. Why? Because when we look at Saudi Arabia and we compare it to ISIS, in reality, there's really not that much of a difference. When we compare the rhetoric of ISIS to the Wahhabism's founder, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, it is identical. They share the same rhetoric against Muslims that differ with them, against Sufis, against Shia, against Christians, against non-Muslims. They share the same intolerance, they share the same executions, and the list can go on. So what we find is what they have in comparison far outweighs their differences. So the only difference really that Saudi Arabia has with ISIS is that Saudi Arabia effectively just has nicer buildings. Now, why is it then we're hearing this kind of rhetoric against, Saudi rhetoric against ISIS? Is it theological? I'd say no. The problem that they have is ultimately political. Ever since ISIS announced themselves as the Islamic State, that by proxy has been a threat to the Saudi monarchy. And this is why Saudi Arabia has a problem with ISIS. It's not the actual ideology, because they share ultimately the same Wahhabi ideology, but it is Saudi Arabia perceive ISIS as a threat now to their regime. Now let's have a look at Haddad's arguments against the burning of the Jordanian pilot, the Islamic argument, shall we say. And Haddad's argument against ISIS is that they have misread or misquoted Ibn Hajar's text pertaining to burning soldiers, or pertaining to burning individuals. And what he says here is that they've completely got it wrong. Now, Haddad, in the video, he explains Ibn Hajar's text, and he says that Ibn Hajar speaks of 3 types of burning. He says the first is using fire as a weapon against an enemy in combat, and then he says that you can use fire as retribution if someone has killed someone by burning them alive. Therefore, one can burn that individual as a form of retribution. And thirdly, burning captives. So prisoners of war, the discussion surrounding can we actually burn prisoners of war? And Haddad says here that that no one agrees with the third type, that no one supports the third type. No scholar has supported this view that we can burn captives. But Haddad unwittingly, in his attempt to criticize the arguments put forward by ISIS, has actually supported their position. How does he do this? Well, when he describes the first type, which is using fire against an enemy, he says that this is equivalent or analogous to bombing, today's bombing. And then if that's the case, if he regards using fire as a weapon as equivalent to bombing, then it follows logically that one can actually burn a captive. Why? Because if the first type is equivalent to bombing, and the second type is burning someone as a form of retribution, if this is also true, then that would mean then we can burn the Jordanian pilot, because the Jordanian pilot was also bombing. And if we can use burning someone alive as a form of retribution, because that individual has also used fire to kill someone, then we can then it follows logically that we can burn the Jordanian pilot. And Haddad ends up in this situation, unwittingly he defending the ISIS position, because he's using the same theological resources. He becomes entangled with his own argument because he's also using the same kind of ideas. His whole idea, his entire theology is underpinned by the very same concepts that ISIS also follow. Now, what is the problem here ultimately? There is a more profound problem, and that problem is this: that the entire discussion surrounding the burning of the Jordanian pilot, whether it was right, whether it was wrong, was based upon a concept known as murtad. And this concept is this concept also involves the view that one can kill a murtad. Both ISIS's theological understanding and Haddad's understanding share the same thing in common, that one can kill a murtad. Where they differ is that Haddad is saying that they are misapplying this concept. They are misapplying the concept of killing a murtad. And this is why Haddad's attempt to attack ISIS or criticize ISIS fails, because he should be attacking the principle that underpins the entire discussion. All that his video amounts to is that they have misapplied the principle. But in fact, what he should be doing is attacking the very principle itself. Well, that's all from me, and I hope that was helpful. Until next time.